that is the new superpower of 2025.
Mm,
I think the ability to tolerate boredom or boredom as like a strategic weapon in your, toolbox, I
mhm.
think, because taking in too much content and not putting anything into the world that I think is my unique perspective on it. And I can't get that unique perspective if I'm not listening to myself and being bored and like dedicating time to boredom, right?
Ty Smith, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for
Ty,
having me on. Appreciate it.
yeah, man, good to have you here. You recently did the 22K row challenge for Mission 22. My first question about that, apart from what made you want to do it and what was the impact on you, is
Mhm.
how did you protect your butt? Because anytime I'm on a rower, even for like a 5K, it gets so sore. I have to get up and like, you need some kind of equivalent of like a chamois, like they have for
You do.
cyclists, but for rowing. So how did you manage that challenge?
Wow. That is of all the questions, that's a great opener because I was terrified of that exact thing. I've done a lot of things. I've done an Ironman triathlon, I've ran ultras and stuff like that, but sitting just always sports where you're sitting as the primary thing. I
Mm.
want to say hot take, those aren't sports. Those are exercises. Those aren't even sports. Anyway, um, I heard about it. I work at the Air National Guard as a physical therapist in Camp Murray, so Tacoma, Washington. And so I'm around military guys all the time. And one of them had mentioned, Mission 22 and the fitness challenge. And then obviously there's a philanthropy aspect. And that's kind of, right on brand for what I'm trying to do with my side project, TriumFit Challenge and all that. It's fitness and philanthropy. So I was immediately in, when I heard that pitch from my buddy on base. And it was already a little bit into like planning for other events that I was doing. So I think you're supposed to do 1K every day in the month of February or until the 22nd.
Mhm.
But I just live streamed doing it in one go kind of thing. And so it ended up being like 96 minutes or something like that. So it was a lot of sitting, obviously. But I don't know. I don't know. My buddy at his house, he has like a special modified cushion for the rower that he has. So I wish I'd done it at his place because it would have been a lot more comfortable. But I just had the standard setup and just shifting your butt and moving weight as much as you can, But I always have a phrase, at least when I'm running, which is the faster you run, the faster you're done. So at a certain point, you're just like, I want to get through this, and you'll kind of pick up the pace and try to finish it. But yeah,
What about when they say slow and steady wins the race?
there's another phrase. Yeah, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. I don't know. You hear a lot of these things, so that's true. I think it just depends how much torture and whatever masochism you're willing to endure.
I've noticed a trend with these challenges lately where there was one I saw, I think Rich Roll posted it on his IG, where somebody did this indoor like treadmill session where it was almost like sensory deprivation. And so the idea was, can you run for 24 hours with zero music, zero scenery change, nothing? And I'm trying to like, I kind of get that. When I think I was 20 years old, I did this something called the Delano 50 miler, and it was in Delano State Park that everybody knows about in Decatur, Alabama, and it was a 1 mile loop that you just did. There was the 12-hour option, and then there was the 50-mile option. I opted for the shorter 50-mile
Yeah,
option,
yeah.
and one thing I did appreciate that you could sort of like trick yourself into like what do we do for the mental aspect of this monotony is that they would
Mm.
have different food that they would bring out about every hour. So it's like hour three, we get the fresh strawberries. And so you had to have that one thing to look forward to. And
Mm.
then with at least with a rower, you have a little display that'll show you how far you've gone and kind of give your head something to move forward to. But the ones where you just completely don't know, that's where the real mind trickery comes into play.
100%. I do mental games like that too. Like if we have I usually do like one hard track workout and then maybe one long run a week currently. But on the track Tuesdays with the guys, I always have a phrase. At some point during this run, I'm gonna need a strategic shoe change. So that's when I put on like the spikes or change the shoes when we're doing a
Mm.
different distance to kind of mentally get through that first half of the workout, and then you're gonna change the shoes and you're gonna have some kind of difference. So yeah, changing up the food, the nutrition, you could do that. Or every mile I was running, I just did a half marathon on last Saturday, And every mile I would switch the Gatorade bottle from my left hand to my right hand, or like little things like that. Like, ooh, I'm so
Mhm.
excited for mile 9. I get to switch my hands on the Gatorade bottle. Like, it makes no sense, but like your mind can play these games where it's like, actually, that's kind of helpful. But that's incredible. I did see something on Instagram where a guy, I think he was a French ultra runner, ran 12 hours straight on a treadmill. I think it was 12 hours. I don't know if it was 24 or 12, but it was, over 10 for sure. And I forget how many he did in the hundreds, and so I'm always fascinated with that. I remember maybe 10 years ago seeing a YouTube video of something called the Self-Transcendence Race in New York, where they do a single New York block over and over it's a race. So it's the entire month. So it's 30 days. People are logging 100 miles a day on average, doing one city block in New York every day for 30.
Wow.
And so it's called the self-transcendence race. I've always been fascinated by that kind of thing and like the
Mhm.
robotic nature of humanity in a sense. It is fascinating to me.
Yeah, there's a certain length that some of us have to go in order to kind of close down. I was listening to a podcast this morning with Jordan Peterson and another neuroscientist, I think, and they were talking about the differences between the function of the right and left hemispheres of the brain. And so the right hemisphere is sort of like bigger picture tasks, where the left hemisphere is more like complex micro tasks. And so the left hemisphere is often more or more turned on when you're browsing social media and looking at stuff in the immediate. And the right hemisphere, if you've heard of the default mode network, that's the one that sort of zooms out. You can sort of think of it as like the part of your brain that's active when you're bored. And people hate being bored so much, they'll shock themselves rather than sitting in a room and being bored, right? Like if they've done these studies, right?
Yeah.
Animals will do this too sometimes. We just hate being bored. But then there's a certain, there's a certain, like the idea of the transcendence as it relates to long distance running. There are certain acts that we can do that shut off that left hemisphere that then allow us to sort of tap into something higher, something where there's the total comprehension of the thing. How did he put it in the podcast? He's like, there are certain big questions of life that can't be fully comprehended, but they can only be generally understood. And
Mm.
so I think that's a lot of the things that are missing that we're looking for in these races, that especially the ones that are monotonous, is like shut off all the noise with extreme measure and extreme prejudice. And I think here in 2025, you have to get creative with how you do that.
That is the new superpower of 2025.
Mhm.
I think the ability to tolerate boredom or boredom as like a strategic weapon in your, toolbox, I
Mhm.
think, because of any time in human history, we're more inundated with notifications and all these things. I try to
Mhm.
keep my phone in do not disturb permanently and kind of silence as many notifications as I can and do my part, but
Mhm.
I'm just as addictive with personality in terms of like these kind of social media things as anybody else. So I'll have to physically turn my phone off, at a certain time at night so I can, get some proper sleep. So it's insane
Mhm.
to think about the world we're kind of ushering in here for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've started to develop a new habit where I leave my phone in like a different room at night at a certain time. Like my timer will go off, like, hey, bedtime. So then my phone just gets left alone by itself. I'm
Mhm.
done. I'm off my phone. I mean, I'm still guilty of it too. Like sometimes my phone will just, magically attach itself to my hand and make its way into my bedroom. But 9 times out of 10, I try to leave it out of there because I am a victim of doom scrolling. I mean, I see one thing like, oh, cool, cool. What about this? What about this?
Right.
So it's all those smaller habits of just thinking like, okay, I need to shut my phone off at a certain time. Um, I need to be off my phone at a certain time. So yeah, it's just those small habits that you need to pick up for sure.
so Ty, from your perspective, what do you think that gets in the way of when we have all these distractions? We talk about the nature of distractibility, and there are sort of clinical terms to describe that. What do you think all those things are distracting us from exactly?
Ourselves. I think creativity in one kind of the pursuit of new ideas in the world. I think it's hard to. There's a balance that we're all striking, I think, between consumer and producer kind of constantly. At least I've noticed that myself. I kind of feel like everybody should have at least maybe three or four hobbies, right? So some kind of artistic or creative hobby, some kind of movement related hobby, like a fitness pursuit, some kind of musical hobby, and then maybe a hobby that you can potentially monetize one day. And my creative hobby is spoken word poetry. So
Hmm.
I feel like there is a balance between producing and consuming, and I'll get into these kind of cycles where I realize I'm out of whack, right? I'm taking in too much stuff and videos and taking in too much content and not putting anything into the world that I think is my unique perspective on it. And I can't get that unique perspective if I'm not listening to myself and being bored and like dedicating time to boredom, right? So that's kind of where I see it. And I see the problem with kind of what we're doing so much as silencing our inner self where we can have that kind of creative outlet, basically.
Mhm. What's that process kind of look like for you? Like, how do you put yourself in a state where that kind of the muse can sort of come out and creativity is allowed to flow? What's been your experience there?
Yeah, I've definitely done what Brandon was mentioning about, the location, the physical location of the device, so you can kind of silence it a little bit there. But it is hard because when I'm writing, I want to look up definitions of words and, thesauruses and synonyms and antonyms. I have to Writing to me is just like a creative puzzle that I'm trying to put the words in different orders. So I kind of do need, I don't have all of it in my head, obviously, right? So I do need some external sources. I'm a millennial. I could pull up a dictionary and buy a dictionary, right? And do that and have a hard copy of something, but that's against my nature. So I usually do have my phone when I am writing poetry or something like that, but it is very difficult. I think there's different apps you can use, Focus, and there's different ones that kind of cut off the, notifications and all that kind of stuff. So there's tools that exist in the modern world that you can use. I find usually doing a rough draft, just with a journal and pen, like, proper notebook, without the phone sometimes can get me started on like what's the broad idea I want for this piece that I'm writing? Like what are the words that I want to potentially use? What's the structure? What's the main message? And if I just write the sketch out by hand in a notebook without any kind of external source, and then because the rough draft is always garbage, right? It's always terrible. So you just have to get something out there, and then once you have the broad idea, then I'll go to, dictionary.com, or I'll go through synonyms, antonyms, and kind of piece what rhymes actually go well together and sound better. So I think having the mix of the analog with just writing it and then fine tuning it with like the perfect word that I didn't know existed until I looked it up on Google.
Yeah, the part of the writing process especially is, I don't write poetry so much, but I've done a couple of books, I've done quite a few blogs for Mission 22 and that kind of thing. And what seems like a helpful feature is one of the least helpful, which is why I use a whole different app called Scrivener that doesn't do this automatically, which is the underlining of red when you misspell something. And why that's so unhelpful is because there are two different modes that your brain needs to be in the creative process. So there's the rough draft creation mode, and then there's the editing mode. And those are two different circuits in the brain. And so when you're constantly switching between the two, like, oop, let me edit that while I write, then you're impeding one, like it's a zero-sum game. Either one of them's activated and the other one's suppressed, and vice versa.
Huh. That's fast. I like that. I didn't never knew that was like a different, yeah, neural wiring in the brain. That's really cool and something I'm gonna think about when I'm writing next.
Yeah, and I think there's a life lesson here too, right? Which is that most of life is a rough draft, and you need to not worry too much about editing as you go. You can sort of that's sort of the process of editing at the end of the day with a journal, right? The journal or whatever your sort of decompression process is talks that's your sort of okay, let's look back at the day, let's spell check now, but spell checking mid doing life is going to trip you up because it's like as you're running, are you doing running drills or are you running,
Mm.
right? The drill and the running or the recovery even, like you can't recover from the run during the run.
Right.
Um, yeah, a friend of mine was talking to me about like, gosh, there's so much, stuff on cortisol out there, like all the podcasts, like low
Yeah.
cortisol, like let's tamp down the cortisol. It's like, well, hang on a minute. That's a God-given hormone that you need,
Yeah.
and you want to peak
Exactly.
cortisol in the morning.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, like the timing of these things makes a lot of difference.
I think that's interesting. The idea of our life as a rough draft. I think that's going to be a an idea I'm taking out of this podcast because so much of there's a lot of people that kind of fall into that paralysis by analysis type of thing, right? They want the perfect plan before they implement anything, and I've obviously been in that stage before, but I think at a certain point, I think maybe last year at some point when I was 32, I was like, I'm just gonna start the project that I wish existed and that I think that I've found great benefit in and that I wish, my younger self would have started before I kind of went down the wrong road for so long. So just the idea that it doesn't have to be perfect on day one and you kind of iterate as you go in public, which is it's terrifying a little bit. But also, you're iterating, and I have no followers yet. So it's like, why am I so concerned with what the internet thinks when the internet's not really following me yet, right? So by the time I have a following one day, hopefully I've done so much early stage rough drafts and terrible stuff that like my stuff gets 1% better every
Mhm.
week, month, year, right?
Mhm.
So I think just the bias towards action starting early because you don't have a following, so there's no stakes yet, right? I don't have to feed my family through my side hustle. I have a full-time job as a physical therapist. So there's really no reason why I wouldn't start this, passion project, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
I love that idea where when you can kind of step into that, this is just a rough draft place, then you can have much more fun with it.
Yeah.
And it becomes more play than perfection. And so I think that like learning that it's okay to fail early, there's a certain mechanism in our brain where if you fail, especially publicly, it's sort of threatening to the brainstem, right? Like, oh no, I won't have my community, I won't
Mm.
have my group that I depend on for survival. And you have to sort of relearn, like, no, in this domain, in this arena, it's a
Yeah.
sandbox and you're safe.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people really get stuck in this idea of no part of life is a sandbox. It's all a combat mission, life or death. And for someone who's literally been to combat, you can understand
Hmm.
that. But then can you allow yourself to get to a point where actually there's a part of my life that is kind of a sandbox and that's okay? And I think that's there's a quote from Alan Watts. He says, sincere, not serious. And
Hmm.
so the idea there is when you're doing your work, when you're creating your rough draft, understand that it's a rough draft and not a perfect final thing, and that's the point. That is the point. There's nothing to edit if you don't have the rough draft first. But then we
Hmm.
get in this like cognitive loop where it's like it has to be perfect the first time, or I'm not perfect, so I just won't do it. Like, what? That doesn't make any logical sense. But we're
Yeah.
that's thinking from an emotional mind, not a logical mind.
Yeah. 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 I think, yeah, the idea of play is something that we lose as we get older. We're conditioned as kids that that should be most of your time, right? Making friends, play. And as an adult, for whatever reason, I think maybe that's why we struggle to make friends as an adult because we don't have such a, whimsical, playful mindset, and everything we think has to be professional and, XYZ when it could just be, hey, do you like doing XYZ? Let's meet up and do that together, and it
Hmm.
could be kind of very, like you said, made in the moment type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And so, what does that look like for you? Because you can tell us a little bit more about this passion project of yours. You mentioned like what was it, a track Tuesday or something like that. Um, in my brain, since we're sort of kindred spirits when it comes to the endurance side of things. Like that is
Yep.
play for me, right? To go out and
Yep.
sort of run around a track and kind of have fun, high five at the end. So, what have you noticed has been really successful within your kind of purview, like where you live, the people you're with, what does play look like?
Oh, that's a great question. So, yeah, Track Tuesday is fun because that's always one of the hardest workouts I'm gonna have on any given week, like a key workout. So that's where I'm trying to invite friends to come out with me because then I'm accountable and I have to go out there and do the hard thing, with other people. So putting myself in that leadership role of like, I joke around like I'm the certified track captain. And like after the workout, I'll do a dispatch from the track captain. So it's like an audio message. Honestly, the most underrated thing I think that everyone should use more is the audio message feature of iPhones. It's just really fun to me because like you can call people, but that kind of stresses millennials out to call people because
Oh,
it's
tell me
like,
about
oh,
it.
they might pick up. Yeah, or they might
Definitely.
not. Or like
It's the worst thing ever.
exactly like I'm terrified of that, right? But a random phone call, I'm terrified. But if I call somebody or whatever and leave a voicemail, that's kind of funny. Or if I just do an audio message, I can say whatever I want. They hear my voice. It's a little bit better than a text. And I think it's like kind of a cool memento that they can save and all that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
one way to make that fun, first of all, is invite your friends because then you have people going to the track with you to do the hard thing together. And then make it like a fun game during it. Like I do, yeah, like I said, the dispatches from the track captain. So I'll say like, oh, well, that was funny when James lost his shoe on lap three, or like that didn't happen, but whatever like kind of story or whatever there is that happened, you kind of do a recap of the workout and who was peaking at certain phases and who was talking shit during the last lap and whatever kind of thing. So they're all kind of look forward to that dispatch at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
hard workout together. So that kind of makes it fun as well. Competition, healthy competition, timing something, keeping track of records and that kind of thing. And I think that makes the hard workouts a little bit more manageable and you could stick to it a lot more.
I love that idea of a dispatch afterward. So it sounds like something like an AAR in the
Like
military
an
where,
AAR. Yep.
yeah,
You would be
yeah.
familiar with that. I'm not in the military, I'm a civilian, but there's a lot of things that I've picked up being in this world that I think you would resonate with. And it seems like, yeah, that's one thing I picked up for sure.
Yeah, one of the things that I write about in our the book that I published with Mission 22 called Return is one of the reasons that veterans can really have this like post-service dip and depression, even though in the moment, Brandon can speak to this as well, probably even more than me. There's times in the moment. I remember watching this old Onion, the satirical news site
Yeah.
thing on like Call of Duty releases actual realistic game, and it had somebody just like staring out into the abyss for an hour, and like that's all you did. Um, and you have those moments of like, what am I doing here right now? But
Yeah.
then the argument that I made was like when you leave, you realize one of the things that you've lost are playmates, which sounds like
Mm,
playmate. What do you mean play?
Yeah.
No, that's
yeah.
totally true. You played
Right.
with your guys, and that was great.
Mhm.
You know, Brandon, what was your experience with something like that?
Oh my gosh. I think the biggest memory I have of like something to that effect was my first deployment. We had gotten this massive care package from someone's parent. I don't know who it was, but there was a bunch of cans of ravioli and we were bored. And this group of ours, we weren't on mission or anything for like a week, so we had like a week of downtime to do absolutely nothing. And we decided that we were going to play baseball with a spiker spade and a can of ravioli. So we literally tossed the ravioli at each other, and whoever won was the person that could get it to stick on the spike every
Okay.
time you swung. And we did that for like 3 days straight because we had nothing to do. Now, keep in mind that this is Afghanistan. Like we're on a fob playing baseball with a can of ravioli and a spiker spade. Like that to me is some like recess activity.
Right. That's huge. I think that's so just because kids can do anything like they could play with cardboard boxes, right, for hours on end and invent these kind of universes.
Mhm.
So the idea that you can go back, you kind of resort to that when you're in the desert with your boys, I think that's awesome too. It could turn into kind of a fun game. So
So, Ty and I actually met via the internet a little over a year ago. We were both involved in this online challenge that shout out to the Art of Manliness crew. And do you still have your bracelet, by the way, that says "Do Hard
I do.
Things"?
I haven't been wearing it in the last couple months, but I see you had it on, so I
Yeah,
respect
I'm
that.
calling
I'm
you
sparing you a
out. I'm
slice.
calling you out.
You should.
I
Yeah.
think that means you owe me a beer now.
Do
Um,
hard things. I like it.
what is important about doing hard things right now? Like we have access to more comforts than ever. What's the point of expanding out and doing hard things, and what is that for you?
Oh my gosh, I could talk about that for a long time. Yeah. There's a lot of books written about this, comfort crisis and all these kind of things. I think it's obviously becoming more optional to do hard things, right? Because there's going to be, I think, a bifurcation of society into two camps. It's either going to be a Wall-E future where you're kind of plugged in, laying down diet soda, mainlined into your veins. But I think there's always going to be a main faction as well of people that are still pursuing camping, hiking, running, physicality. You're going to always want to be embodied in that kind of sense of being in the world and that kind of thing, pursuing hard things. But it is becoming slightly more optional because of how much our life can be, door dashed instantly kind of thing. So,
Mm.
pursuit of hard things to me is just, it's somewhere in it's in all of our genetics, to be honest. I think we're ignoring it, to be honest, because we've only gotten here because of our ancestors have done God knows what in the forest and foraging and killing shit and bringing it back and
Mm.
hiking over mountains. And so that is deeply in all of us. So if you're choosing not to do those things, I think you're just silencing a part of yourself. And I'm always trying to pursue living a full human experience. And to
Mhm.
do a full human experience, I need to have a physically strong body. That's the kind of the primary thing, in my opinion, the basis for all the things and all the good things that I want to do and build relationships and build businesses and all these things. It kind of all starts a little bit with
Mhm.
your body, right? Because if you're not, obviously, it's like the self-care thing, right? Put your mask on first. So the idea of I have to do these hard things to then respect myself, to then like I'm just a different person when I've worked out and when I haven't worked out consistently,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
I can't show up well for the world if I don't take care of myself in a sense, and that's through the pursuit of doing hard things. And I can't say how much it does for my own mental state. I wish I could tomorrow give everybody the gift of fitness, but again, I don't think it exactly works that way. I think you have to go through the struggle sessions in the gym at 9 p.m. and you don't want to do it. And what is consistency? And why am I doing this? And it's raining outside. And humans are very good at conjuring up endless excuses, right? So I think it just becomes, it definitely becomes a lifestyle to a certain sense. And you kind of become known for that. And I've
Mhm.
always kind of I guess not always, but in my 20s, I got known on my ice hockey teams as kind of the healthy guy or whatever. And so
Mhm.
it became about eating clean and those kind of things. I never attached myself to a specific diet. I think a lot of people get too identified with keto and paleo and all these things.
Right.
But I liked I kind of like the identity of I'm the healthy guy and I work out and those kind of things.
Mhm.
And it's kind of morphed into fitness and now challenges and fitness and philanthropy specific is the niche that I'm kind of rocking. And so I think that's an awesome legacy to have is that I now see doing hard things not just kind of for myself, like I had just mentioned. I'm doing them for myself, but then also to give back to others. Because my whole thing is I attach physicality and challenges to philanthropy and giving back to the community, whether that's through Mission 22's 22K Road Challenge or the 7 events that I've created at TriumFit Challenge. I now have a bigger purpose to train to keep myself healthy so that I can get other people to join in with me, and then we can give out more to give directly into the 7 charities that I have through the calendar events. So it's huge for
Mhm.
me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to get in a little bit more to those challenges, but as you're talking about like you're the healthy guy on the hockey team,
Mm,
when I was in college and was first sort of catching the ultra marathon triathlon bug,
yep.
I forget the exact context. I was with one of my ROTC buddies, and for some reason, the topic of what human meat tastes like came up because cannibalism was going around. And somebody said, actually, human meat would be pretty sweet because of all of the sugar that we consume now. And my friend was like, bro, yours would taste terrible. Like, oh, thanks. I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh, yeah, that idea of getting yourself fit in order that you can contribute to your community. It reminds me of
Hmm.
an analogy that C.S. Lewis talked about in the book Mere Christianity, where he discusses the folly of somebody thinking, well, it doesn't affect anyone. What does it matter? What's it matter if I what I do, at a dark night by myself? I'm not affecting anyone. And the reality is there's nothing you do that doesn't affect other people. It might not affect right this moment, but
Yeah,
the way that you show up, as you were talking about the way that you show up in the world to people is a reflection of what you've been doing in private, right?
yeah,
Your character is most on display when you're alone. And and you know, and so the idea that C.S. Lewis talks about is like he has this image of like a flotilla of Navy ships going in a particular direction. And so if one of the ships isn't taking care of itself with its maintenance and all of the normal things it needs to do to go in the direction, it might not run into another ship immediately, but it's going to be thrown off course a bit, and that's going to affect the entire flotilla.
mhm,
So as it relates to the fitness challenges that you do, and I'd love to hear more about what those entail, how do you what opens up for you and for other people? So let's say like you've dialed in that 1 hour a day. Okay, we're getting fit.
mhm.
What does that open up? Because there are 23 more hours in the day to, do life in.
Yeah. I think it sets the whole entire day up. I wish, to be honest, I wish I was the Jocko wake up at, 3:30 and you're working out 4 to 5 a.m. I'm not typically wired like that. In a perfect world, I wake up at about 5:45, 6, do a little bit of work, writing, kind of that thing, work on my side projects, and then I'll have a good workout like 9 to 11 a.m., that 2 hour window, and then I'll have a really big lunch and that kind of stuff after. Because I like doing cardio relatively fasted, but I don't like necessarily lifting a whole lot fasted. So that's kind of a perfect day for me. It's relatively out of the way early-ish, before the afternoon and evening. I'm not opposed to working out whenever I can get it in, but It does set up the rest of the day because the better you work out, I think, especially if you're doing it outside, get some vitamin
Mhm.
D, sunlight, you're gonna then sleep better that night. You're gonna fall asleep, faster and kind of reset circadian rhythms if you're doing it outside, that kind of thing. And your whole next day is gonna be better. So in my opinion, again, it kind of comes back to how you show up for the other people. You can manage your hormone levels a little bit better if you have that, feeling of exhalation of doing something hard, whether that's taking a cold shower, whether that's, a cold plunge or a hard workout, that kind of thing can change it. So I tend to sleep better. I tend to make more mindful food choices. I'm like, well, I just kind of really worked out really hard right now. I might as well put some good food in my body as well. So I feel like that correlation is pretty high with what I'm eating, and it eventually becomes I just want to perform better, right? I want to do better on my workouts. I track my workouts, and so I don't want to eat garbage, 24/7 because I don't want to have terrible week of training. And I still kind of do the cheat days and whatever, and I'm very loose with my diet to a certain extent. But the thing that keeps in the rails is just that I want to perform and feel better. And once you eat consistently and work out consistently for long enough, you kind of realize what habits kind of contribute to your overall well-being and how it can set up your future there. And I don't know, there's so many relationships you can build with people. If you do, like I said, Track Tuesdays where you invite people over and then now you're doing hard things and then you go hang out after and now you're making friends and you don't know, the internet is such a wide place now too. I think there's a really cool community of hybrid athletes and people doing all these
Mhm.
kind of things, which is I'm just diving into that world now. I've only been on Instagram really for 9 months or something like that since May last year. So I've always been kind of an anti-social media guy, but now I'm seeing the benefit of that kind of online tribe, and that is kind of a deep sense of you can get motivation and inspiration from other people that are across the world, which is really cool.
Yeah. You ever have those videos where it starts out with some, your typical, like, here are these silly dudes who are, we're going to throw this thing onto a frozen lake bed. Let's see what happens. And then it
Mm.
like cuts in the middle of the video, like, go outside. You know what I mean?
Oh, I like that. I don't think I've come across that. It's not in
Yeah.
my algorithm yet, but it should be, to be honest.
Or some like big tough guy will hey, cut out that social media scrolling or whatever. So
Right.
yeah, it can definitely be leveraged for good, and that's one of the
Yeah.
challenges that we have in running the recovery and resiliency program is how do you make people who are disconnected feel connected,
Mm.
even if it's just in an online space. And we have what is kind of cool is that if you can kind of do that somewhat successfully, it does provide the invitation of, hey, how do we meet up in person? Or if nothing else, hey, maybe I can do this with my own squad here at home as
Mm.
I'm opening up to these other people. One of the things that I feel like that if you have 1 hour in your day, let's say you start the day with some type of fitness routine, and what, I'm interested in what does that open up for you as a human as a whole? Like, okay, great, you're fit. One of the things that my coach has asked me before is like, imagine you're in a coaching conversation and you say to your coach like, "Oh, I want a six pack. Like that's my objective. I want these, I want to look good." Like, okay, cool. Let's say you look good right now. Let's say
Mm.
like everything that you describe you have right in this moment. What does that person want? Like, where are we
Mm.
going with this? And so it's like, oh, I want to lift, I want to bench 300 pounds. Okay, cool. That's, great. We can talk to your
Right.
CrossFit coach about that. But what does that person want?
Yep.
So, I'm gonna put that question to you. Like, like if you were to describe, like, man, I want this TriumFit thing to like have, 10,000 followers.
Right.
Awesome, awesome. What is that version of Ty want?
Yeah. I mean, that is largely what it is at this point now. I think the backstory of how I got to TriumphFit is that I had been doing exactly what you just stated. Oh, I want to get my bench to 300 pounds. Oh, I want to do a 5-minute mile. Oh, I want to do an Ironman triathlon. Oh, I want to do whatever it is, right? I had a physical bucket list feat or physical feat of, bucket list items that I wanted to do in my life. And I became so engrossed in training. I was doing a sub 5-minute mile, 315 squat training camp essentially, and I was working out like 4 hours a day. It was insane, right? I was limiting my social relationships and all these things to pursue this goal. And I understand, I mean, that could be a sign of discipline, and there's certain positives you can take from that. But then at the end of that, 12-week training block, I was like, okay, that was interesting. I didn't hit the mile. I got a 5:05 mile and I did hit the squat, but I was like, I just felt kind of hollow. It's like as soon as you get to the peak, you're like, what am I doing with my life? And I
Mhm.
don't have kids or anything or a wife, so I wasn't neglecting like really immediate, really important relationships in that sense, but even just friends or calling your family more or little things, right? If you're always in the gym and always on the track and that kind of thing. So I had this kind of realization like if I continue down this path of just pursuing more, bigger, faster, XYZ, XYZ, I'm gonna die, and then there's gonna be nothing to show for my life at the end of it. Like, that's great, Tyler. You did all these things, but no one's at your funeral. No one gives a fuck about what you did or what your mile time was, right? And so then I was kind of like, I need to save myself from myself, essentially. And that's what TriumFit became of I want to create something where we're working out for a higher purpose. There is a reason behind staying fit, and we can have access to these things and push each other farther and give back through charity and all these kind of things. So that's really why I'm so passionate about this is because this is what I needed, 5 years ago. Not to say that there's no benefit. The Ironman, doing a full Ironman has changed me in a lot of ways. That the phrase anything is possible has definitely stuck with me, and that's made me pursue certain things that I wouldn't have done otherwise. So again, it's a weird thing of I don't regret the path that I've gotten to be here now. But I just wish I had thought of this a little bit sooner and that I can balance both of you can still sign up for races and do those things, but don't just do those things. Like also have a reason and do Mission 22's challenge and donate money. Why are you saving all this money? Like we're so fortunate to be in the US and in America. We have no idea that I could just work out for 4 hours a day. That's such a gift and such a privilege, right? So, I think I felt a little bit too selfish. I think the problem Triumphant is trying to solve is either polarity. It's either the people that have no motivation to work out at all, they don't see a purpose in working out. They're not motivated by vanity necessarily. They're not motivated by the six pack, like your example. They just don't
Mhm.
have any reason to get up. But maybe if they have a tribe to train with and that will go push them harder and they'll give back and see the benefit of what they're doing, maybe that'll get them to work out. And then TriumphFit is also solving for the exact opposite person, the person like me last or 2 summers ago that was working out 4 hours, 5 hours a day, a complete exercise addiction, always in the gym, and still felt that hollowness of like I'm just pursuing these, fruitless endeavors at the end of the road, and it's not going to mean anything when I'm dead, right? So I'm trying to either get people to start working out and find the benefit of community, or to kind of not feel as selfish when they're working out too much because now they're training for a higher purpose through the challenges that I've created. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I love that distinction there, and you can apply that, distinction for a lot of different groups. So, like, I was listening to the Modern Wisdom podcast, and he was talking a little
Mm,
bit about how, yeah, there's definitely a contingent of the population, that first one that you mentioned, that needs a little David Goggins, that needs a little
yeah.
like get up and go. But then there are
Mhm.
others of us who need like the serotonin version of David Goggins, of like,
Mm,
hey, who rested the most this week?
yeah.
Like as opposed to being proud of how early you get up, like, hey, I did nothing. There's a verse, I think it's in Ecclesiastes, that says, better is a life with one handful than two handfuls and full of toil. And
Ooh.
and so like it's the old story of like I think it was Siddhartha. It was in the Buddhist
Yeah.
tradition where he's trying to. Well, I'll abbreviate the story, but
Yeah.
essentially, he was after he sort of figured out that the his life was not just this walled garden that was totally idyllic and you just have pleasures wherever you turn. He goes and he finds, he discovers what sickness and death and loss entail.
Right.
And so he's like, oh no, how do we solve this problem? And so he goes on this journey of pure asceticism, not
Hmm.
aestheticism, that would be different.
Right.
Asceticism, where it's basically total self-denial. And he gets to a point, as the story goes, where you could see his spine from the front because he was basically not
Mm,
eating. It was like a total denial of his thing. But he got to a
right.
point where he's like, I'm dying. Like, I'm going to die. This isn't how we do life. And then
Right.
around that time, he sees this boat that's going along, and there's a mentor-mentee relationship with these two people learning how to play this instrument. It's a stringed instrument, and as the learner, the mentee is starting to learn how to play and tune this instrument. You can think of like a guitar or a harp. The instructor, he says, not too tight and not too loose. And so it was like, that's it.
Yeah. That's huge. That is a great metaphor. Ecclesiastes, I grew up in a religious household, Presbyterian. I would consider myself more agnostic, maybe more of a deistic take. Like there probably is something behind all of this, right? But don't necessarily believe in one specific path. But I've read the entire Bible cover to cover. I did like a chronological Bible in a year thing, and
Mhm.
Ecclesiastes just hits. It's my favorite, favorite chapter in the Bible because or book of the Bible because it gets so damn real. Like it's just ashes
Mhm.
to ashes, dust to dust. None of this. I'm like, that shit I love. That's just crazy. I love that. So Ecclesiastes is awesome. Um, but that balance again of like, yeah, self-denial and overabundance, that's always an interesting one.
Mhm.
Dopamine, or cortisol, David Goggins, serotonin, David Goggins. Yeah. Chris is awesome. I love that podcast as well. So I think there is an interesting puzzle we're all trying to solve in the modern world of how to balance everything, right? Is in life is balance. So it's how you do it well. I think that matters.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And one thing I love about how the book of Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, and Job are all sort of arrayed as
Mm,
a collection. And so you have Proverbs that comes along as sort of this like peppy teacher who's like, if you do well, then things will go well for you. If you do
yeah.
bad, things will go bad for you. And then Ecclesiastes is sort of that critic of like, okay, let's bring this down to earth. Like it's not so simple. The rain
Right.
falls on the good and the wicked. And then Job comes along and shows like this is what this looks like in a story form.
Hmm.
You
Good
know,
way to
sort
put
of,
that.
yeah, so sort of like that right-brained understanding of things where you can
Yeah.
only come to a sort of felt understanding sense. There are different types of knowing and like with the bigger questions of life, like that's where you kind of have to get to a point where I was reflecting on this morning actually. So imagine there was a speaker who's going to go in front of this large audience, like Tony Robbins style.
Hmm.
I'm gonna help 1 million people, and by all basic metrics, you could say yes that if you go to this speaking engagement, you'll edify your whole audience, and whatever, applause, accolades, everything else. But on the way, you notice there's someone in need under a bridge, and
Mm,
they're asking for help, and there's something in you who's like, I need to go and see that person, but I'm going to be late for the speaking engagement. And then you go and help out that person. You don't know why, but it turns out through that help, they end up becoming your biggest, like the whole other world of opportunity opens up for you.
mm,
This actually happened kind of with Mission 22, where one of the guys who's one of Mission 22's biggest proponents was a homeless vet who now like has all these social media things and
Mhm.
generates this a lot of awareness about what we're up to because I believe that was Magnus who went and this is a whole story that I remember him telling.
Mhm.
Magnus is the Mission 22's founder, and
okay.
so I love this idea of being able to like having the not too tight and not too loose idea
Mhm.
is that you simply don't know which metrics are the most important. Maybe that one noticing of somebody who otherwise didn't get noticed is more important than you and going to talk to 10,000 people at once.
Right.
You're just not really sure.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think it comes back to mindfulness, intentionality and seeing, yeah, not being so distracted in your plan, obviously, that you lose potentially a bigger picture, bigger contributor to the end vision. I think of the parable of the Chinese farmer. Have you ever heard that one? Where there's a
Maybe,
series of events that
yeah, maybe
happen and he can't
so, maybe not.
yeah, maybe so, maybe not. His son breaks his leg. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. He
Mhm.
can't get conscripted in the army because he has a broken leg, so it's a good, so he's
Mhm.
always kind of like maybe this is a good thing, maybe this is not. And yeah, I think that idea of we can get so locked in our plan that we are blinding ourselves to the person right next to us that maybe is a bigger part of our plan, like you're saying.
Hmm. Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about that as it applies to you. When was a time in life where you felt like you sort of had a plan A and then something radically changed and you had to course correct?
Oh, I think it goes back to athletics for me. So I grew up weird enough in Southern California in Los Angeles, Santa Monica, playing ice hockey. So that was my main sport. And I guess I got into it. My dad is black, my mom is white, and my dad went to a game in 1960 something to see the LA Blades, a minor league team, play. And Willie O'Ree was playing. And he was essentially the Jackie Robinson of the NHL, first Canadian
Mhm.
black player. And So he saw, this guy that looked like him, and he eventually went on to be a firefighter. And when he played in the adult hockey leagues, my father did. So when he had kids, he put us in hockey. So I always kind of grew up playing, and so I wanted to go D1. I wanted to be on the LA Kings, and I wanted to, be a professional ice hockey player. And so that was always my plan. Obviously, like most kids have that as a end goal. But then in junior ice hockey, I had a tryout in New Mexico. I dislocated my shoulder in my one and only ice hockey fight. So not the greatest enforcer in the history of hockey, but I wasn't bleeding, so I thought I won the fight, and then I realized I couldn't lift my arm. So dislocated my shoulder, had surgery, and eventually physical therapy. So that's how I got into the world I'm in now. And so that's one of the pivotal moments in my life because I wouldn't be here on base talking to you right now if I didn't fight that guy, dislocate my shoulder, have rehab, really respect my physical therapist, and then kind of pursue that as a career. So that's one way that I've been derailed of, a potential Division 1, whatever scholarship and playing at Denver and all that kind of stuff. But I got to play club hockey and I had a great time and I got to study abroad because I had more time. If I was a Division 1 ice hockey player, I probably wouldn't have studied abroad. And so I got to spend 6 months in Australia and met an incredible amount of international people and did a whole like backpacking trip through Europe the next summer when I graduated or spring. So got to go down, basically Sweden all the way down to Spain and then England. So meeting all these people that I'd studied abroad with. So I had great relationships with those people that wouldn't have happened if I had probably played D1 at Denver, right? Because of that injury.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, what's that old quote? Man makes plans and God laughs.
right, right. Or Mike Tyson, everybody's got a plan until you got punched in the face. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's another one.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's it. What have you been noticing have been kind of new opportunities for you lately as you're kind of you've got this kind of side project and you've got your main
Mhm.
physical therapy thing. What are you kind of seeing in that is opening up for you and your community?
I think it's cool. I think being on this podcast, because I had just talked about this in my newsletter, this last newsletter I wrote every 2 weeks I'll write one. TriumFit, what's it called? TriumFit 2's news. And I had talked about I have an upcoming event for Cesar Chavez Day on March 30th and the next challenge event. And I was like, oh, I'm trying to do 25 tickets or entry ticket sales for this event. And I'm going through this book called $1 Million Weekend by Noah Kagan. And he has a 34-step business challenge checklist of basically how to go from zero to starting something. And so in my newsletter, I'm going through that challenge checklist one by one every week. And so this week's challenge was to think of like 5 avenues of marketing that you can do for whatever your business is. And so I was writing like what the marketing channel was and expected sales from it or whatever. And so I was going down the list and I wrote like, there's a thing called podmatch.com where you can have a profile and then based on your interests and that kind of thing, podcast hosts can select you to be on their show. It's called Podmatch. And so I was like, oh, I'll create a Podmatch account. This is like my fourth thing on my 5 that I was listing. And then hopefully I'll get on 1 or 2 podcasts and make a sale or something like that. And then totally randomly on my Instagram feed, I see you have a podcast. And I was like, oh, I remember Marcus. That's cool. And so I was like, let me get on your show. Right. So I think that's just like a random, that was kind of a cool, like, God moment. I don't know what that is, or universe moment, kind of being like, oh, you had this intention to get on a podcast and do
Mhm.
something with your thing. Oh, well, like here's a channel. Here's Marcus right here to drop it in your lap. So I just think that's kind of a funny thing of like it is a lot about like there's a phenomenon. I think it's called the Bader-Meinhof bias or something where it's like, oh, I want to buy a Toyota Tundra. And then literally when you drive down the freeway, you're going to notice every Toyota Tundra that you see driving by. It's like anything that you're putting that attention on then starts to
Mhm.
filter and like those inputs are always being put into our brain, but you're not selecting for them because you're not putting awareness into it. But
Mhm.
as soon as you have that like shift, then now you're seeing all those things. So like I was somehow subconsciously putting the idea of like I want to be on some podcasts this month to talk about my thing and whatever, right? And then I see on my feed that you have a thing. So that's a kind of weird way that the universe kind of opened up, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that. And it's the principle there is your values direct your aim. So
Mm,
we miss almost everything. Like,
Yeah.
so imagine you have a,
And that's a good thing.
yeah,
That's a good thing. We would be
yeah.
flooded by too much stimuli if
Hmm.
we didn't select. Our
Mhm.
brain didn't select. Yeah.
Right. And something to be aware of there is that, well, what are you selecting? And so if you
Mm.
have a constant negativity bias, you will continue to
Mm.
find things in your environment that reinforce that you're right. Right? So
Yeah.
it's like nothing ever goes right. And then you go and you search for things that don't go right for you, and then you amplify those and you tell them to your friends, and your friends
Yeah.
give you pity, and that's the thing that you were after in the first
Mhm.
place. And it's just poor me, victim, everything goes wrong. Oh, wow, you're really.
Right.
But then exactly the same set of circumstances can be given to somebody else. The story they tell themselves about it is like, look at all the opportunities I have here.
Yeah.
So if you want to see things that go wrong, you will. If you want to see opportunities, you will, given the same perspective, like given the same circumstance. Yeah. So,
That's huge. I'm a big fan of Stoicism as well. I think I had my early 20s, mid 20s, all about Stoicism. I was kind of filling the void of like, oh, I don't have my religion anymore. I need something to guide my ethics and virtues. And Stoicism is a very, virtue-based kind of thing and controlling your mindset and all that kind of stuff. So Stoicism filled that vacuum for a lot of things. And I think Tim Ferriss calls it like one of the most useful softwares you can run for your brain, which is very true. It's very anti-victimhood and kind of the idea of every time some hardship comes, if you just rephrase this as, oh, that's a stoic test. This is a test from the stoic gods, even if you don't believe in the stoic gods above you, but this is a test from whoever it is to see what kind of person I am under adversity. Like this is an interesting challenge that I could have. Oh, my flight just got canceled and I'm going to be late for my meeting. How do I respond to this interaction? Do I yell at the flight attendant or whoever's checking the bags? Or I just kind of, understand that this is part of life. And a specific thing that happened in my life with that is that I was flying out to your neck of the woods, to Portland, to do a grad school interview at, I think it was George Fox University. And for whatever reason, I had been staying at the wrong gate the entire time. This is at LAX. Staying at the wrong gate. I wake up, it was an early morning flight. And so I wake up from my nap and I realize this. And apparently I have to go on a shuttle, not just two doors down. I have to go on a shuttle to get to the actual correct gate. I missed the flight. I'm really upset, all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to miss the interview because I planned enough time, but I'm going to have to take the flight the next day. I go to sleep. I wake up. I get an email on my phone. I got into San Diego State University, which is my dream school for physical therapy. And I was like, well, I don't even need to necessarily take this flight. So I just kind of turned it into a vacation anyway. But it was the idea of like, I could have been so frustrated and just, I don't know, like freak out about it. But literally, while I was potentially freaking out, there was an incoming email from a school saying I got an acceptance into their doctorate program. So
mhm.
I think it's just kind of like reflecting on that, I think makes a big impact of how you frame it, like you said.
Yeah. And I think airports are a fantastic way to test your stoicism, right? There was
Yeah.
a flight that I had fairly recently. I forget all the details, but basically it was like I was able to compress what would have been a 7 hour layover to like a 2 hour layover. And
Mm,
then the flight for that was a 2 hour layover got delayed, so it became a 2.5 hour layover.
okay.
But nothing that they could say would upset me because my baseline expectation was a 7 hour layover. And
Yeah.
so I was like, oh, we're
Mhm.
so sorry. It's a half hour delay. And I'm like, whatever. This is great. Like I'm saving so much
This is a
time.
4 hour surplus. Yeah.
Yeah. And then my fellow passengers could have interpreted that as like, oh, what a drag. Right?
Mm.
Same circumstance, different story. So it really calls into question like, well, what are your personal expectations for what this is?
Ah, that's good. I want to start. I've always had this idea, not really. This is just like a funny idea of starting a YouTube channel called People Running in Airports. And it's literally just footage of people late to their flights, just sprinting in airports. I think it would be fire and that would get like millions of views. But that says a lot too. That's really why I want to stay fit. So I can sprint in a damn airport and get to my flight. No, I think that is hilarious though. And I think someone should start that channel because I think there's so much footage and it's hilarious. You can see like does this person train at all? Have they run more than once in their life? Like this is the real test. Can they sprint to not miss a flight in the airport?
Well, see, this is why athleisure is getting so popular. It's like if you
Oh,
know, yeah,
that's really why.
at any given moment, you can
Poor
sprint.
time management. Yeah, that's why athletes are taking off.
Yeah, that's the real market value. You've been posting some stuff lately about sprinting. Speaking
Yeah.
of, tell me a little bit about kind of what your current training is.
Yeah, absolutely. Late last year, I think November, something like that, I saw a YouTube video of a man doing 1,000 Murph workouts. Obviously, you're in the military. I think you know what the Murph workout is: push-ups, pull-ups,
Mhm.
run, mile, run. He did 1,000 Murph workouts. I think it was in 1,000 days. I think it was continuous. And I was like, that blew my mind. That was a frame-changing moment. I've heard of people doing 50 marathons in 50 days, that kind of thing. Iron Cowboy, that's really crazy too. 50 Ironmans. But the 1,000 Murphs in 1,000 days kind of blew my idea of like that's some discipline and commitment that I respect. And I was like, I go on these night walks. Kind of speaking of how I build boredom in, I'll usually go on a night walk. I prefer to do my good thinking like as a wrap up of the day. I don't necessarily journal all the time, but I'll do like a walking meditation where I think about my day and think about my life without my phone and all that kind of stuff. I'll just walk a mile, 20, 30 minutes. And I was like, well, what could I do for 1,000 days? Like what would that actually look like? And because I am very fascinated by the idea of attention to something, motivation, discipline, and accountability. In my opinion, maybe it's a hot take. I think attention obviously trumps inattention towards a task. I think motivation trumps simple attention to the thing because it's a kind of a driving force. I think discipline trumps motivation, but honestly, I think accountability trumps all of it. And so if you have a smart accountability system built in, I think that's actually maybe the highest level of it. And so I was like, I want to document the journey to 1,000 days of sprinting. And so this started last year. I just finished day 140 yesterday. And so I'm documenting it on TriumFit Challenge on my Instagram and all that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of really how it started with that. And so it basically it's 1 minute of sprinting every day. So it's three 20-second max efforts with 2 minutes of rest between each interval. So 20 seconds all out, 2 minutes rest, 20 seconds all out, 2 minutes of rest, and then 20 seconds all out. So 1 minute total. It takes 5 minutes. And I think everybody's got 5 minutes. I don't really care what you're doing, how tired you are, what's happening. And I've chosen to do it with multi modalities. So I can do it on an echo bike, I can do it on a treadmill, I can do it on with goblet squats, with a kettlebell. As long as it's max effort, a ski erg, a rower, I could do anything I want as long as it's max effort, right? That counts as a sprint in my definition, right? So that way, it's a little bit more if I'm traveling. I'm going to go to Japan in October. So if I'll sprint in the airport in Tokyo, whatever. I'll hit my goal, right? So I think that accountability has been interesting to post that online and to have the streak. And every 50, I do a live stream and do like some kind of one of my favorite quotes or phrases. The first at 100, I did you would like this, the man in the arena speech from Teddy Roosevelt, because
Yeah.
obviously Art of Manliness is obsessed with Teddy Roosevelt, and I am too. I think he's the greatest president. He protected the national parks, Yosemite, all those things. And so I memorized, I've always had that, it's not the critic who counts. I can recall that whole poem. And so I did that for the 100th live stream. And so every 50, I'll do that kind of thing. But yeah, it's been going really well so far. There's always, like I said, some 5 minute window I can put. There's always three things that will change my physiology. Like if you're having a terrible day, I think what you really need to do is spark your physiology somehow. Usually that's an ice cold shower, a really hard workout, or maybe, like I said, a 5 minute sprint interval thing, right? And those can really change how you're perceiving life, and it's tough when you're feeling sick and those kind of things, but it will. If you take a cold shower when you're sick, I think it can have a big impact. So you need to change your physiology. It's a physiological problem if you're feeling, under the weather or something like that, usually. So don't attack it with logic. Attack it by changing your mental and mind state and physicality. Um, but I am learning a lot about, accountability, discipline, motivation, because I don't really have the motivation to sprint every day anymore. Like it's been 140 days. That's usually a short-lived kind of thing. And I guess you could call it discipline at this point, but at at a certain stage, if you are sick or something like that, like even if I'm disciplined to do my sprints, it's easy to conjure up excuses like, oh, I'm still disciplined, but I have COVID or I'm sick or like I don't need to sprint because so it's like it's a way out. You can still maintain your discipline, but it's a safe way out of not doing the thing. But because you can say, I'm legitimately sick, right? But if you have accountability, like I said, I will get to 1,000 sprints in 1,000 days. Even if I'm lacking discipline and I have that excuse of like, oh, I'm sick today, I'm still gonna do the damn thing because it's 5 minutes. It's relative to how it's max effort. So even if I'm sick, if I still go hard for 20 seconds, that still counts as a sprint because it's all relative to your energy level that day. So
Mhm.
I think that's why I'm like accountability is actually more important than anything else, right? And so if you're documenting something in public, if you're telling friends about it, here's another pro tip. If you do what's called I think it's called a Ulysses Pact from Odysseus. When he was going through the siren song, he had his shipmates pack his ears with wax so that
Hmm.
pack their ears with wax and he could hear the siren song, but he
Mhm.
couldn't do anything about it because he was tied to the ship. So he wanted to basically like understand what the lure of the sirens were singing, but not be tempted to like break anything in their place. So the idea of a
Mhm.
Ulysses Pact is like if I don't hit the 1,000 sprints in 1,000 days, I'll donate $1,000 to a tobacco lobby or something, like something that's like
Mhm.
doing really shitty things in the world, whatever that is for you. It could be some people hate Donald Trump, so they'll donate to Donald Trump. Some
Mhm.
people hate Kamala Harris, so they'll donate to Kamala Harris. But it's like
Right.
a negative incentive to do the thing.
Hmm.
So you could do it with that, but that's another form of maybe accountability. So I've kind of found what I've gelled with, and it just seems to be I don't want to let people down, and I'm doing it through my Instagram on TriumFit Challenge. So it's kind of a fun way that I'm keeping myself accountable. But yes, I'm 140 days strong, going for 1,000, and it's been great so far.
Yeah, I love the spirit behind that, and the it almost. So, what was the first one I heard? Discipline, motivation, or motivation, discipline, accountability. What was the very first one?
The very first one is attention, just
Attention.
being
Okay,
aware of something.
got it. Yeah, and that to me almost sounds like a life stage development. Like as
Mm,
when you're very young, maybe like the early, the thing that you needed when you were young, it needs to be outgrown eventually. It doesn't make that thing bad. It's just not
yeah,
appropriate later on in life. And I wonder, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. I don't know if this would be adding a fifth thing or it's
right.
wrapped into accountability, is I do the thing because it's simply who I am. So
Identity, yeah,
yeah, and so James Clear talks a lot about this. Like if you
right,
see yourself as an athlete, it's not, you don't need discipline, you don't
right.
need motivation.
Mhm.
It's just who you are.
Yes.
There's no it's like the as above, so below concept. I am
Yeah.
this, so I do that.
That's another that is I would wonder where I would tie that in. That would be more linked to, I think, to discipline than account. But again, when we did the strenuous life and through the art of manliness kind of program, again, a big thing with that is just do hard things and you kind of commit to doing 60 minutes of working out every day. But at least I know based on who I am as a person, I can commit to 5 minutes, 5 fucking minutes of anything. Sorry if I can't curse on your podcast. But 5 minutes, I can cement in my legacy, my life with 100% certainty. There will never be a day where I cannot commit to 5 minutes of moving my body. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's like the minimal effective dose to me. I think to get the results that you want with a business or a body or relationships, I am fascinated by two things: compounding and consistency. And you can't get to the compounding effect of anything if you don't first have the consistency. And so, what are the strategies to get consistency? Those are attention, those are motivation, those are discipline, those are identity, those are accountability. That's what allows consistency, which then allows you to have compounding effects that stack and stack and stack. And we,
Mhm.
as humans, don't well understand the process of exponential gain and logarithmic scales. We
Hmm.
understand somewhat kind of a linearity to things, but we do not understand how you can go from 20 followers to 200,000 followers in maybe 2 years. If you have the right account, repost your thing or whatever it is, right? You would never project linearly that makes any sense for your development. But if the right audience sees a really useful thing that you provided value for, you can be gone, like in 2, 3, 5 years, right? So humans don't understand that concept well, but you need to have the things that you're doing every day, and those are the hard things. That's the hard thing I've accepted into my life is a 5 minutes, sprint interval training, right? And I think that's fairly manageable for most people. So that's not my plan necessarily to have like, a tribe of people that do 5 minutes of sprinting every day. I don't, that's not as interesting to me. More interesting to me is people that sign up and do my challenges because then I'm donating 50% of the profits to these charities and have a bigger impact in the world and give directly through a Willpower Wednesday, Burpee Poker, fun game that I'm doing as well. So I care more people to do those things than necessarily to do my 5 minute sprint challenge every day for the rest of their life. But if people want to do it too, that's cool. Or if they want to find accountability in their own way. But I think everyone should sit down and write what is the MVP? What is the minimal viable product or minimal viable program that I can run in my life? For me, I've had shoulder surgeries. So every morning I have to do 5 minutes of rotator cuff strengthening. I do band work. I do external rotations. I do my push-ups. I do scapular raises. I do all those things because then my shoulder doesn't ache during the day. And if I don't do my workout, that 5 minute stability program, my shoulder might just kind of have like a 2 or 3 out of 10 pain just because I've had so many stretching of the ligaments in that shoulder. So again, those are kind of like the things that I just kind of have to do. And again, I'm not a robot. I have, difficulties like every other person on the planet. But I am fascinated by the robotic side of nature and how, man can become. I just wrote a poem about this. And so speaking about this, I haven't recorded it yet, but I just wrote it. It's called Man in the Machine. And it's the idea of how humans can kind of take on, become algorithms of discipline is one of the phrases in the poem. And so that's been really exciting me as well. And I think there is something special about streaks. I'm always fascinated by people that I've run 1 mile every day for the last 5 years. I'm like, tell me more. Like, I want to talk to you. You're an interesting person. Somebody that wakes up every day and runs a mile for 5 years straight. Like, I've just talked to somebody last week that has a 5 year running streak going. And I'm like, you're interesting to me automatically. There's something about the way they prioritize their life. My dad is a lot like this. He was a firefighter for 38 years. He's been retired about 10, but he still wakes up at 3:45 every morning. He walks for 2.5 hours, or he does a 3, 4, or 5 mile run, and he's 74 years old. And so, again, if I'm a good human for any semblance of, being a good person, it's really because the one word I would describe my childhood is stability, right? My dad is a firefighter. My mom was a pediatric oncology nurse at UCLA. So they were both in healthcare. So the 2007 financial meltdown, none of this affected my family because they're still going to the hospital. There's still people getting heart attacks and need to go to the hospital for paramedics and that kind of thing. So I had a very stable upbringing. One brother growing up, two older half sisters, and no divorces, and family, two-parent family, all that kind of thing. So I again can credit a lot of what I am today as the product of who I was raised around and my parents and all that kind of stuff. But my dad's ability to kind of turn that robot streak on and kind of I see his example and I'm like I could do that too in my own way, right? So I don't know. I'm just fascinated with compounding and consistency and streaks, and it's really interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah, man, I love the story and how, there's a certain resentment that people can have if they grew up with abusive households or something like
Yeah.
that, where it's like, well, you don't know what it's like, and like, well, maybe I
Mm.
don't, but I'm taking responsibility with what I have, right? So everybody has some type of a privilege, and so the question is, well, what do you do with it? You take responsibility for what you have. Um,
That a
and
way to get out of that. See the way that to phrase that exactly what you're saying is like there's no utility in the victim mindset. Like Jocko extreme ownership is always going to be advantageous. The stoic mindset always going to be partially advantageous. But the other thing is like if somebody hits you, you get whiplash associative disorder because you have a neck injury from a car accident. Again, it's not your fault that
mhm,
somebody hit you. But it is now your responsibility to do the physical therapy, to do the rehab, to get yourself better.
mhm.
So it doesn't matter whose fault it was that you're injured. It's 100% no one else is going to do the exercise to make your neck feel better after an injury, right? Like you have to do those things. So if life has given you a shit hand, like it's not your fault, but it's still your responsibility to change your life and get out of that rut. Like no one else can get you out of that rut but your damn
Mhm.
self. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, well, that's kind of the story I'm hearing you with the hockey thing, where
mm,
it's like, oh, it's the other guy's fault that my shoulder got hurt or whatever.
mm,
Even though like all of us know like you
yeah.
started it.
Right, I 100% did. I actually, yeah, I called him
Yeah,
out and it didn't work.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's awesome. But the thing about that is like, well, but it's not fair. Like, yeah, back to the book of Ecclesiastes, man. Like,
Yeah.
go read that if you're dealing with fairness. But
Mhm.
you get to then like that's where your life can kind of start. Like that can be
Yeah.
the nucleation site of the thing that makes you you, and maybe that was the whole
Mm.
point all along.
Yes. I like the idea, nucleation side. You have a very like Jordan Petersonian way of like saying things. I really respect it. Like that, you just did a little nucleate. That's like something I would see in a Jordan Peterson video. That's cool. I
Right
feel
on.
like you have a pretty good grasp of psychology. Did you go to school for psychology?
Yeah, I did. I've got a background in clinical mental health counseling and life coaching, health coaching, that kind of thing.
Very cool.
Um, yeah, I'll work on my Canadian accent, but I can't guarantee I'm going to get there.
Just start apologizing a lot. Just say sorry, sorry, sorry. Hey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I played hockey with a lot of Canadians, so trust me. They're actually the nicest people off the ice. They're complete dickheads on the ice. They will slash you. They will cross. They're so violent on the ice because that's their territory. But as soon as the game's over, they'll shake your hand. They'll buy a beer for like they're the nicest people after. But man, they're mean when it comes to hockey.
Yeah, you got to have an arena for it somewhere. Like maybe
Right.
our diplomatic differences right now, it seems like partly have been settled on the ice. I don't know.
Yo, that the Four Nations tournament. Yeah, that's wild. That was a good one.
Although I shouldn't say too much because I think we lost the most recent game. But anyway.
We did. Yeah, we did not win the final.
Oof.
Well, dude, this has been an awesome conversation. I'm super stoked with what you're doing with your side projects and everything. For listeners, if they want to keep up with what you're up to, where would they find you?
Yeah, they can find me on my website, triumphitchallenge.com, Instagram, triumphit_challenge. Again, the slogan is give back, never give up. So I have 7 charity challenges a year. The next one is on March 30th. It's called Bringer of the Bells. It's to honor Cesar Chavez, who was a big farm workers' rights advocate. In the 60s, he marched 280 miles from Delano to Sacramento, California for migrant workers' rights. And so basically, my whole thing is I create a physical challenge, some kind of historical reason behind the challenge, and then a financial donation. So he did 280 miles for farm workers' rights. I'm doing a 2.8 mile farmer's carry with about half my body weight.
Let's
That's the
go.
gold division. Silver division is a 2.8 kilometer farmer's carry with about quarter body weight combined in your hands. So that's kind of the reason. They're kind of fun ways to like, oh, why am I doing this thing? Oh, because of this historical person. It kind of started in 2024 when I realized, why do we get all these holidays off? Like, what's the history? Who died? Somebody died to get you this day of rest. Like, why am I just resting on,
Hmm.
MLK Day? Like, what exactly did he do, right? And so then I created this thing called the Selma to Montgomery. It's a tribute that he did in 54 miles from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama for Voting Rights Act. And so I do a 54-mile run walk in 54 hours. So the whole thing is like that. It's on triumphitchallenge.com. If you want to sign up, I donate 50% of the profits to a relevant organization. Like for Martin Luther King, he was a co-president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So I donated to that for that. Farm Workers Justice for Cesar Chavez, Free the Slaves for Juneteenth, all the things. 911 Tower Challenge for September 11th. I do a Memorial Day Murph. I do a Veterans Day, digging a trench for trench warfare. In November, I do a 4th of July feast and fast and donate to Action Against Hunger. So there's all these kind of things that I'm doing, 7 challenges. Check it out. It's really fun. And I'm just trying to grow it as much as I can. Passionate as hell about this, and I want to see it take off. So
Love it, man. And the website again is TriumFit challenge. Triumphit.
100%. Yep. TRI. So Triumphant Fitness Challenge is the whole way you could say it, but Triumphit is the way I abbreviate there. So TriumFit challenge.com.
Love it, man. Can't wait to see where you go with this.
Appreciate you. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate you, Brandon. Appreciate you,
Yeah,
Marcus.
of
Y'all
course,
doing good
man. Thank you
things.
so
And I love
much.
Mission 22 as well. Appreciate you.
All right, till next time.